And we are recording this to the cloud. I think it's week 10, actually. But we're at the AECT conference here in Las Vegas, Nevada. And some EDD and PhD students within the IST program are here, and I'm meeting them. So it's great to finally see people face-to-face again. And also face-to-face, we have many authors of articles that we're reading this semester in Designing Learning Environments, R622. And I thought it'd be really great to have a couple people who've done something like I did in creating a free book in the field to talk about what the impact has been, why they did it, or the purpose thereof, and what might happen next. So we have Rick West with us right here from BYU, and Jason McDonald from BYU, who are going to join us and tell us the background story or the backstory and maybe some front stories. But I'm really curious to know what prompted them to create an open educational resource for the field of educational technology. What is their individual backgrounds that led them on this path? So can you tell us, Rick, what was your first move in the open education space? There had to be something before the book that came out. And by the way, this is in your syllabus, Design for Learning from EdTech Books 2021. So what prompted this?
Yeah, thank you, Kurt. So the first book I did was actually the foundations of learning and instructional design technology. And maybe some of you have encountered that in some of your classes as well. And I was teaching a foundations class at the time. So a lot like you, Kurt, I was teaching a class and we had great textbooks, great resources, but I felt like we could do a similarly good job and make it open, make it free, make it able to be constantly updated because it'd be digital, make it multimedia because it'd be digital. I just thought there were a lot of benefits we could have. And honestly, I think what motivated me most was students like yourselves. I just felt like it would be great for you guys to have a free resource that you could keep after the class was over. You don't have to sell it back. Students that are thinking about our field but aren't here yet and they want something to read, that there's a free book that they can look at. So I decided to make that Foundations book. It's now about 5 years old, and we're actually right now making a second edition of the book. And it was interesting, Kurt, because the first time we did that book, it was kind of hard to get people to write for it. This idea of writing for an open book was kind of like, what you want me to do? What is that going to count for tenure? You know, a lot of questions like that. Yep. But we were able to, so we got some people to write chapters. We also grabbed some material that we got copyright permission to use. Anyway, but it's time to update it because some of that material was older, and you might be aware of that if you've read the book. And so we're going to be updating it with new stuff for the second edition. But anyway, that was my first foray. And then Jason contacted me and said, why don't we do one for instructional design classes like the class you're in? And I thought that was just really exciting to do another one. Yeah. So the first book I did was the Foundations of Learning and Instructional Design Technology. It's supposed to be a foundations class that kind of gives you a little bit of theory, a little bit of history, a little bit of technology awareness. And then the book with Jason is Design for Learning, which is specifically about instructional design.
Actually might be in your syllabus if you look carefully. It's kind of similar to my story in the Adding Tech Variety book, which you all have that's free on motivation and retention online. And there's a brand new smaller scale version from the Commonwealth of Learning that just came out 2 weeks ago with a free class. So these things evolve, in effect, is what you're saying. One thing leads to another, you know. So we'll come back to Jason about who all did contribute to that first book. But let's hear, we'll go back to Rick. Let's hear from Jason.
Of course, thank you. There were a few things that prompted this. One was we did have this history in our department of starting to create some more open text, and we started this EdTech book platform underway, and it was becoming something that we were starting to champion, and we wanted to see if we couldn't at least begin the path of creating Z degrees, where students could participate fully in our program ultimately without having to incur any textbook costs. So is this a long-term vision that we could achieve at some point where everything that we offer our students is open resources in some fashion? So that was certainly something I wanted to contribute to because I teach the Introduction to Instructional Design class, which is one of the classes that not every student, but by far most of the students in the program take. So it seemed like a great way to start to achieve this vision by creating something that was so foundational to the program. Another thing that was very important to me is I was also prepping an undergraduate class in instructional design and technology for a design thinking minor that we were just launching at Brigham Young University. And so as I started to evaluate materials for that class, it seemed that so many of the existing resources, which are wonderful, there's nothing that says because we have an open textbook now that we're in any way feeling derogatory about the existing texts in the field. They're classic and they're wonderful and they're very important. But because we are primarily graduate programs in this field, they seem to be, a lot of them, over the heads of undergraduate students. And so it is something that we see is going to be very important for us in the future, is undergraduate education in learning design and technology. And so we wanted a text, if we could, have dual purpose, things that went deep enough and rich enough and robust enough for graduate students, but also some very foundational chapters that could be appropriate for introductory at the undergraduate level, right? And so that was something that Rick and I talked about. And could we try to really pull off something that was dual purpose? We thought it was worth a try. And I think we were very successful in that. I think that there are definitely some things that for an undergraduate course, more of a design thinking focus, rather than I'm necessarily going to be a professional in LDT, but I want to understand design thinking as it applies to education. We've allowed those kinds of students to be very successful, as well as it's, I think, a great introductory text for graduate students as well. That design thinking focus was also a really third important emphasis to us. As we looked at the existing texts, it seemed that we hadn't made that transition yet to incorporating design thinking into our primary textbooks in the field. And so we also saw this as an opportunity to champion to push the field a little bit and champion, this thing that's important to all of us, I think, in the field, but just hasn't made it into our textbooks yet.
Well, we're seeing a huge push at many universities because they see there's jobs out there. I think the last time I saw David Merrill speak at this conference, he noted that there's a lot happening at the undergraduate level. I know that West Florida has an undergraduate program. I think Mississippi State, maybe workforce learning and instructional design. Do you guys know of other universities that have made inroads or have large populations of undergraduate students?
So Utah State University has a program. It's more around UX design, but because of the history of Utah State, it also has a strong learning emphasis in that program. Right. Rick, there's like
no, it's not. I think there's a lot of actually doing it. It's been a our desire to design more, maybe what we think is very the very first word is, so the focus is design, and it's design learning rather than design learner. And also, we reference, you need to know what it is, but rather talk about different knowledge that knowledge is in unique ways. And so all those models, skills, knowledge that you should know and will help you.
And that's the field name change, learning design and technology. Where's the ice program may create a new umbrella so if this is your book helping that's the same question in a different way. But I want you to talk about the first book for a second again, and you about the second book. What chapters, what topics, or what people would you like to highlight? I know every chapter is important. Everybody wrote, Rick loves every chapter in the book, but if he doesn't mention you, he has limited time. So in our limited time, can you highlight a couple of ones that they might If you were to recommend 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters to definitely read, and then tell us why you think you should read it.
It's like picking a favorite child, right? It's hard to do, but there are some
Yeah. Yeah, the director, one of my best friends forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really important. What is this? What I love about I don't think I don't have.
I was an accountant. I had to take all these side courses to get ready for grad school. I know what you mean.
And Lloyd does a really good job in this chapter. We need all. There is no to become. I like that.
And by the way, my class is filled with medical people.
Oh, there you
So,
go.
yeah. So,
there you go.
Coming from radiology and whatnot.
You belong.
Yeah.
And then some of the big ideas.
Yes.
From Hager.
Oh, yes.
We had a classic in human performance.
In fact, if you
Great.
took 511 with that article, and also 511, he went for Ellen Waker. Yes, yeah. And if you haven't seen the interview I had with Brian, he said it.
I think that's Hager.
Oh, God.
We just summarize three kind of colors
Right.
in one chapter. Learning. Dave Merrill. Then a couple back. When you do stay, the little book. Easy on all the models. Great way. And then kind of on you do saying one is like here are the ADDIE models, and the next is here's the ADDIE design thinking model. And I think those are both really great. Human performance technology. I think those are.
Yeah, that's great. My old area is a social culture.
Yeah.
No. Use that. Yeah, all those people take a look at.
Yeah, very good. Very good scholar.
Just take a look. We'll go over here to Jason and ask the same question about the newer book, the 2021. But the first one was 2017, 18?
About 2018.
18. Okay. Well, about the 2021.
The design for learning book. And maybe one of the things I'll highlight things that you won't see in a lot of the more classic texts in the field. So the first one, we have a great, it's chapter 2, designing for diverse learners. So Susie Gronseth, she's down in Texas right now. She led with a couple of graduate students. Such an important chapter. We're such a student-focused field and a learner-focused field, but also now championing the cause of students with different kinds of abilities, so neurodiversity, as well as students from traditionally marginalized backgrounds. They wrote a very important chapter, designing for diverse learners, that helps kick off the textbook. Right. As we get into some of the design thinking skills, so again, Vanessa, that Rick, it says, is an author in his book as well. Svihla. She is, yeah.
You know, it's important to point out the field's becoming eclectic or multidisciplinary in nature. Yeah.
Just on the topic of design thinking in general, and what distinguishes this from other approaches to instructional planning. But she also wrote a great chapter on the idea of problem framing, which is this stage early on where we try to figure out, are we even talking about the right kind of problem here? Because the way we define the problem informs so much the solution that we're ultimately going to land on. And so spending some time early on and saying, well, is it really this problem or this problem or this problem? And she has some great practical techniques. So this is a practical textbook. She has some great practical techniques in this chapter about how to define the problem and push your own thinking in what you think the problem is that you're trying to solve. It's a great chapter. That's one. There are, oh, that's a good question. Let's count again. It's 36 chapters. We actually launched the project, I think it was the 2019 AECT. Was that when we were in Kansas City?
You announced?
Yeah. Yeah, so we were passing out flyers and announcing it. And it took a few months, to get some momentum. So we started in earnest into 2020. A lot of people, obviously the pandemic was so disruptive in so many ways, but it did also give some people free time to write more textbook chapters for us. So most of the writing happened in 2020. We finalized it towards the end of 2020 and published it at the beginning of 2021.
People say, what can I do? What can I do to contribute? This is an obvious way to build one's reputation in the field and also feel some personal meaning and a purpose. And so my 1998 book, Electronic Collaborators, was an edited book, and that's what got me known. So if you want to start small, don't have to write your own book. You might edit a book and make it free. Do you want to comment on anything that Jason said?
Yeah, well, and maybe on what you're saying, Kurt, there are actually several student authors in these books. They're not first authors, they're authoring with faculty advisors. And so, that might think about. Yeah, I think everything that I think you've also got some great things in this book that are like, how do you do prototyping, visual prototyping? How do you evaluate and different data evaluate? So I think it's some good practical things as well.
Let me just add to there too. So we do have a section on different learning media. So instructional text, instructional graphics, instructional communication that talk about really practical principles for designing these things. We're built on theory and practical experience, but these are when you're designing that. Here is a great tip for writing
things like most of on instructional design, they just say you need to analyze, you need to evaluate. But they don't actually, I think, to know how do I actually do this. And we've got a few I love the chapter about working with state. We got who were professional designers, but they really about how you actually work with clients. Nobody ever how to do it. And how do you talk to team? And I think those are really interesting efforts.
Right, because the publishers, whether it's Wiley or they cut these chapters out, they're often the best. They've done it many times. They change the title of your book, right? Because it's like everyone in the test. So you have a little more ownership. And you have more autonomy in the design of and design of the book. So it's challenging, but it's fun. There were many things that you said that stay with me, but I want to go back to BYU. Okay. BYU has been a hotbed for open education. And I wonder if you might comment on the history of that so people can appreciate the history of BYU and what's happened over time, or maybe comment on why you think that's the case, or also comment on other universities that have been leaders within the field of like MIT and others have been leaders in this space. And also, I'd like to get a sense of your contribution within the open ed field. Do you go to the conferences now?
Yeah.
Are you aware of different things that you weren't aware of in the past? Has your network changed because of the book? The people that you now talk to on a regular basis to share ideas or run symposia, just because this open book pushed you in a different direction or within this broader field?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it.
But I'll just describe it to you. It happens on one of the so that's in 5 the I think storm.
The perfect storm. Shareable content.
Right.
The perfect storm.
That's right. And BYU
Right.
used to be held at BYU.
That's right.
BYU developed open technology to try to encourage open and sharing of those things. Steve Wiley,
Who's now the president of AECT?
He's now the president of AECT. Then went only because he wanted a nonprofit.
Right.
Then after that, and part of that was college.
That's right.
So I talked about it's okay, but not very. And I was you know, pain in the yeah, that's yeah. And then he calls me up like a week later. Hey Rick, I thought he had like edtechbooks.org. Of all the open tech for our, but it's also people can go in there free. Create account. You can do it right now. Create account. You can start creating. And
Royce wrote the software to create
Royce wrote
in a week.
Well, beginning of it.
Okay.
He's been at that
Okay.
ever since.
Of course.
And I'll tell you, it's funny because I have an idea. It'd be really be like a great idea. And then like 2 days later, he went home. This is really what created the that allowed all the other people out. A lot of the
We'll go over to Jason and get his perspective. Really, MIT and BYU kind of were the launching pads for the open educational resource movement back in 2001. Charles Vest says, let's make all MIT courses free, but they needed a platform to do it on. And David was involved in creating this open courseware platform when he was at Utah State, in fact, I think. And then he moved to BYU, and the project's expanded at much success all around the world. I've been researching MIT open courseware since that time and interviewing people who were self-directed in their own learning. And I'm happy to share that. And there are a couple of people that you've mentioned along the way that I've also interviewed for 511. So if you've taken my 511 class previously, you might recognize some of the names that Rick and that Jason have been mentioning.
So yeah, we are trying to create through EdTech books as a comprehensive platform as we can. And obviously we're fully crediting these authors and these other platforms. And even with the open licenses, we're trying to link to the original courses wherever we can, because we see this as a robust, vibrant community, and we want 1,000 flowers to bloom, wherever they're being planted. But also for the people who have the good ideas, Royce, Rick said as much good as he could, and I get all of that. And I want to say even a little bit more. He's a fabulous developer, but he has an educator's heart. I mean, he's doing this because he really believes in getting great material out to people and breaking down all those barriers. And Rick is absolutely right. If you have a good idea, Royce will just kind of think about it and figure out a really elegant way, more elegant than what you were originally kicking around with him about how to do it. He's building in peer review mechanisms. He's building components to allow for open publishing of journals, which is a huge thing. The dissemination of our foundational knowledge. He's trying to help champion and help us get better at doing that. I didn't find it right. Yeah. Right. So it's just a great resource. I would encourage you to go get it, play around with what it allows themselves.
Almost out of time here. I want to definitely ask one more question, but I also want to point out that, Rick, when you mentioned the industry chapter, we have many of our students who are working in industry will want to read that about dealing with client relationships. More than one. I also want to mention that John Hilton, who's in religious studies, very big component of self-value students. One of my advices is dissertation. And so he's also sponsored or endorsed the application of many IU part of the open conference. There's a long-running conference that David started called Open Study, and it continues kind of split up but they have an annual application process where you can get funding for 2 years to go to that conference. And IU students are very successful in that regard. So being involved in open education, that's one way that you could be involved, and you'll get mentoring to help you with your research. I just want to mention those things. The final question I'm going to ask, I think to Jason. Well, did you want to comment on anything, and then I'll ask the final question. If you want to add to that?
I'll only say that
Right.
And he believes,
Yeah, really good point. The last question I'm going to ask, and I'll go to Jason first. What's next? What haven't you guys done? So I'll give Rick to think about it. Or what's next on the docket for you in terms of open education, or in terms of helping the field of instructional design and technology, or learning design and technology? Or what might they want to look for that you're doing a conference on that's going to be open and they might want to sign up to attend? So what's next in terms of books? What's next in your career? What's next in terms of events?
Thank you. So, there's more ideas than time available to do them, right? Which is unfortunate. So I'll just share just a few of the things that are on our minds, not just me individually, but also through the platforms that we have. So broadly, through AECT, they sponsor the Journal of Applied Instructional Design, which is hosted on EdTech Books. So Jill Stefaniak is the editor. Royce is one of the associate editors there, mostly working on the platform. And so I would encourage students to check out the Journal of Applied Instructional Design. There's some of the most wonderful things going on in the field right now are being published in that journal. Me personally, so I'm dabbling in a lot of educational, some philosophical issues related to our field. And so the next book project I'm kind of thinking about, I really am kind of starting to think about how do I get an open book out there that I'll probably author this one, maybe get some collaborators who may help me out a little bit on philosophical issues in learning design and technology. And are we keeping pace with the things that we understand about who people are and the way the world is, and how can we bring those things in and champion those kinds of issues as we're designing for a smaller world all the time and an ever more increasingly diverse world all the time.
Well put. For a quick answer, I put him on the spot. No one really knows where they're going with their careers. Things happen, and that's what we do, according to B.F. Skinner. And I'm not a Skinnerian. I worked with B.F. Skinner's daughter and son-in-law, and I learned that concept. And it's true. It's true. So, Rick, I will give you the final say on this one, and we'll probably wrap it up.
Okay, so I did started prototyping.
Hey, we got breaking news
on your channel. Because I do a lot. This is all to or they are and are measure. And you don't write an article. Here's a bit about them. Or
Hey, this is breaking news on our channel, Design for Learning Environments. So I want to thank you. I'm going to stand up behind and get them on camera as I close the show here on this episode, week 10 of R622. But it's been a pleasure having both you guys on. We have some important topics in the half-hour span. We've got a lot of topics that are very important to the field, and a lot of people, and a lot of resources that you can access. In particular, Design for Learning from EdTech books, and the other one is
Foundation. And then
there we go. 3 who are there, and 1. So enjoy and what's left of it. I want to thank again Jason and from BYU join us in our class.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody. We'll record this.